Even though Hollywood in general has been struggling, every year we have a couple of larger releases, and it seems like Dune 2 is definitely going to be the movie to beat this year because it delivered on its promise with a giant opening weekend. I have a few things to show off, but before we get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, follow me on social media, and consider supporting through Patreon or through YouTube memberships. Now, obviously, when the first critic scores released a couple of days ago, we were all pretty weary because I and many of you do not trust critic scores, but users are loving it, and clearly audiences are showing up to see it because it is dominating the box office. This is a Hollywood Reporter article I wanted to start with. It says Warner Brothers and Legendary's Dune Part 2 has delivered on its promise to re-energize the box office after a terrible early winter. Now, Dune Part 1 was actually a very good movie. Was it perfect? No. They definitely made some changes to the source material. They, of course, were trying their best to adapt something for, let's be honest, normies. It was definitely a bit kind of scaled back compared to the portion of the book that it did cover, but it overall was still a pretty solid experience. I do agree with the user scores that it was like an 80 to an 85. It definitely was not perfect by any means, but this one definitely was a lot closer to the source material and quite a better adaptation, and it is receiving the praise that it definitely deserves. I mean, of course, we knew that this movie on some level was going to be really good, not just because the first one was successful, but because of the star-studded cast and the additions to the cast that they made, like with Anya Taylor-Joy, fantastic actress in my opinion, but they definitely are seeing a lot of success from their good decisions with this film because Denis' sequel, sporting an A-list cast led by Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya, opened to an estimated $81.5 million in North America, double the first film, and the biggest opening of the year to date. Now, of course, we're only 3 months into the year, and there are going to be, I'm sure, other large releases this year, but this movie, already coming out in March, is setting a precedent for the rest of the year that Hollywood needs to step up their game, and that you can't just throw anything at audiences and hope that it sticks. It says, though, it's a major win for Legendary in broadening the audience for its Dune franchise, and is the biggest opening to date for Villeneuve and Chalamet. Now, of course, we do not have the third movie greenlit yet. It's kind of a no-brainer that they will end up continuing the Dune films, and they are going to do a part 3 / adaptation of Messiah, but we do know that they are doing other spin-off shows like the one featuring Lady Jessica, or I should specify starring Lady Jessica with the Bene Gesserits. So we do know that they are not completely, done yet, even though, of course, this movie does have an ending compared to the first one that I know a lot of people were a bit upset with. But they definitely are leaving things open because Denis has said that he does want to do Messiah. They have not, again, officially greenlit it, but he already has some script work done. They have soundtrack done, so they really are prepping for this. But it says Dune 2 is likewise whipping up a sandstorm overseas, where it opened to 97 million from 71 markets for a global start of 178.5 million, which of course is great because sci-fi can be a tough sell in certain regions like the Latin American markets, but Europe and other areas more than made up for any kind of gaps that some regions saw. And we're also now finding out that due to updated numbers, it puts the domestic opening weekend of Dune 2 at 82.5 million, the exact same debut as Oppenheimer. And of course, Oppenheimer went on to earn almost $950 million worldwide. But it is important to point out that they had re-released Oppenheimer in theaters twice, hoping to hit that 1 billion mark, and they couldn't quite hit it. I personally, while I do like Dune, do not get me wrong, and I do think that this was a very solid movie, and both of these Dune movies have been very solid. I don't think that Dune 2 has the legs at the box office that Oppenheimer had. Obviously, only time will tell. It definitely could top that 1 billion mark. Judging by, the comparison to something like Oppenheimer, they are on par with each other, so it could be right under that mark. I personally think that Dune 2 will probably end its box office at about 850, so I think it's still going to be a ways away from that 1 billion mark, but obviously only time will tell. And right now, people are absolutely loving this movie, which is great to see. I mean, Dune Part 2 over on Rotten Tomatoes, it is sitting at a 93 critic and a 95 audience. There are, of course, thousands of audience scores that have already been left, and judging by those scores, but that 95%, I mean, most of these are extremely positive, primarily 5 stars, some 4 stars. Very rarely are you actually coming across a 2 out of 5, and when you do, people are saying things like this: it's very loud and long and languid, it's not very creative, I almost fell asleep, and it bored my kids. This really isn't a movie, though, for 11-year-olds and 13-year-olds. Of course, they are going to be bored by it. This isn't, I would say, a movie that most kids are going to want to sit through, unless they are definitely, more nerdy. They're definitely into sci-fi, but even so, the Dune movies, all of the Dune iterations that we've gotten, have in their ways been very slow and very long, and I think it's an interesting complaint that it's very loud. Yeah, I mean, this movie definitely has a lot of action and a lot of emotion, and I feel that they did really nail the soundtrack and kind of the ambience in the movie that I do think they did a pretty good job with in the first film, but definitely nailed with this second one. So I think it's funny that they're saying that it's loud when, of course, when you've got a lot of explosions and a lot of action, it is going to be loud. But I thought that this movie was visually stunning. One of the prettiest movies I have seen in a very long time. People are saying things like great continuation, awesome giant scenes, very moving when it's supposed to be, wonderfully done. My only problem will be waiting for the next film. The visuals were breathtakingly stunning, not just the desert, but the other settings as well. Love the complexity of the plot too. Also, the battle scenes really pulled you in. I mean, overall, this is a smashing success for Denis Villeneuve, for, of course, all of the actors that are part of this. I mean, it is an extremely successful movie. At this point, it will be interesting to see over the next couple of weeks how it does fare at the box office, if we do end up seeing a pretty steep decline or if it holds pretty well. Only time will tell, but this movie so far is very successful. And of course, with the kind of rut we've been in with movies and all of the bad releases we've seen over the past couple of years, it is good to see a decent movie release and, of course, get the praise that it deserves. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, and if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I will talk to you all again in the next video really soon.